The long peace captain Day-Wan stood on the bridge of the morning calm, watching stars drift past the viewport like scattered diamonds on black silk. He was 53 years old, and for 30 of those years, he had commanded this vessel through the quiet corners of the galaxy. The ship was a civilian science vessel, nothing more. It carried no weapons beyond mining lasers. It posed no threat to anyone. That was the way things had been for 400 years. Day-Wan remembered his grandfather's stories about the old days, about when humanity had warships and soldiers and fleets that could shake the heavens. But those days ended before Day-Wan was born. The integration wars had seen to that. Humanity had fought the Galactic Coalition and lost. Not badly, but definitively. The peace treaty was clear. Humans could join the galaxy, but they would never again build weapons of war. For 4 centuries, humanity had honored that treaty. They became traders, scientists, diplomats, and artists. They spread across the stars, not with guns, but with ideas and commerce. Children grew up never knowing what a battleship looked like except in history files. The galaxy had almost forgotten that humans were once warriors. Almost. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal," said Lieutenant Tai Yang from the communications station. The young officer was barely 25, fresh-faced and eager. He had never seen combat. None of them had. Day-Wan turned from the viewport. "Put it through." The signal crackled with static and interference. Through the noise came a voice, high-pitched and terrified. It spoke in Coalition Standard, the common language all species used. "This is Listening Post Gamma 7. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Unknown hostile forces. Heavy casualties. Please, anyone, help us." The signal cut off abruptly. Tai Yang's hands trembled over his console. "Captain, the post is 3 hours away at maximum speed. I'm checking Coalition fleet positions." He paused, his face going pale. "Sir, the nearest Coalition warships are 2 weeks out." Dr. Hana stepped onto the bridge, her dark hair tied back in a practical bun. She was the ship's chief xenobiologist, brilliant and curious about every species they encountered. "What's happening?" "A listening post is under attack," Day-Wan said quietly. His mind was already racing through the possibilities, through the calculations. "They have hours. Help has weeks." "Then we have to go," Hana said immediately. Day-Wan looked at her, then at Tai Yang, then at the rest of his bridge crew. They were scientists and explorers. They studied planets and cataloged stars. They were not soldiers, but they were also human, and somewhere deep in their genetic memory, something old and dangerous still slept. "Set course for Gamma 7. Day-Wan ordered. "Maximum speed." The morning calm turned and accelerated, pushing its civilian engines to their limits. 3 hours. They had 3 hours to figure out what they were going to do when they arrived. Day-Wan called a meeting in the conference room. Around the table sat his senior officers: Hana, Tai Yang, Chief Engineer Bo-Ra, and Ensign Kyung, who served as their navigator. "Let me be clear," Day-Wan said. "What I'm considering is illegal. If we intervene in a military action, we violate the treaty. Earth could face severe consequences. I could face prison. You all could." Bo-Ra, a woman in her 40s with grease-stained hands and a sharp mind, leaned forward. "Captain, I've served on this ship for 12 years. We've charted dead systems and empty worlds. This is the first time someone actually needs us, really needs us. The Coalition has protected us for 400 years. Tai Yang said, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. "Don't we owe them?" "We owe them obedience," Day-Wan replied. "That's what the treaty says." "The treaty also says they'll protect Coalition facilities," Hana pointed out. "But they're not here. Those people are dying right now." Day-Wan closed his eyes. He thought about his grandfather again. The old man had served in the last human fleet before the disarmament. He had told young Day-Wan stories about honor and duty and sacrifice. He had also told him about the cost of war, about the friends who never came home, about the weight of command. "My grandfather told me something once," Day-Wan said softly. "He said that humans didn't stop being warriors because we lost. We stopped because we chose to, because we decided there were better ways to live. But he also said that a choice you can't unmake isn't really a choice at all." He opened his eyes and looked at each of them in turn. "I'm going to help those people. Anyone who wants off this ship can take a shuttle and wait in space. I'll take full responsibility, but I won't order any of you to break the treaty with me." Nobody moved. Kyung, barely 21 years old, spoke up. "My grandmother taught me old Earth martial arts. She said it was just tradition, just culture. But she also said we keep traditions alive so we don't forget who we are. Maybe we've been remembering all along, Captain. Maybe we just haven't needed to. Bora grinned fiercely. I've been engineering civilian ships for 20 years, sir. You know what I've learned? There's not much difference between a mining laser and a cutting beam. Not much difference between a cargo launcher and a mass driver. We've been building peaceful tools that could be something else if we needed them to be. Daewon felt something stir in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. Humanity had laid down its weapons, but it had never truly forgotten how to make them. Then let's see what this old science ship can do, he said. The next 2 hours were a frenzy of preparation. Bora and her engineers worked miracles, reconfiguring systems that were never meant for combat. Mining lasers were tuned to higher frequencies. Emergency cargo launchers were loaded with solid metal canisters. Shield generators meant for radiation protection were boosted beyond safe levels. Hana studied everything they knew about the attackers. The listening post had managed to send partial data before going silent. The hostile ships were from the Vakrin, an empire from beyond known space. They were raiders and conquerors, and they saw the coalition as weak. They would see humans as weaker still. Taeyang trained the security team. They had stun weapons and restraints, tools for police work, not war. But he showed them how to move, how to cover each other, how to think tactically. The knowledge was there, buried in training manuals that were labeled as historical documents, as cultural preservation. When the morning calm dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the listening post, they found hell waiting for them. The post was a small station orbiting a gas giant. It housed maybe 200 people from a dozen species. Now it was burning, venting atmosphere into space, surrounded by 4 Vakrin warships that were taking their time with the kill. The alien ships were larger than the morning calm, heavily armed and clearly built for violence. They looked like predators, all sharp angles and weapon ports. Daewon sat in his command chair and felt calm settle over him like an old coat. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. The first rule of combat is to know what you're fighting for. The second rule is to never fight fair. Open a channel to the Vakrin ships, he ordered. Taeyang looked confused, but obeyed. A moment later, an alien face appeared on the screen. The Vakrin commander had 4 eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. It looked at Daewon with something like amusement. A human ship, the creature hissed in Coalition standard. How curious. Are you here to beg for your Coalition friends? Or perhaps to join them in death? Daewon smiled. It was not a friendly expression. I'm here to show you something, he said quietly. Something the galaxy has forgotten about humanity. And what is that, little captain? We never forgot how to fight. We just chose not to. There's a difference. Then he gave the order that would change everything. All weapons fire at will. Embers beneath the ash. The morning calm shuddered as its mining lasers fired for the first time in anger. These were tools designed to cut through asteroids, to bore into rock and ice for mineral samples. Now they sliced through the void toward the nearest Vakrin warship, beams of focused light that could melt metal. The Vakrin commander's face twisted with surprise as the first beam struck his ship's flank. The armor held, but the impact left a glowing scar across the hull. Evasive pattern delta, Daewon ordered, his voice steady. Bora, how long until those lasers overheat? 2 minutes of continuous fire, Captain. The engineer's voice crackled over the comm. Then we need a cooldown period. These systems weren't built for this. Nothing we have was built for this, Daewon muttered. Taeyang, launch cargo containers on my mark. Kyung, take us into that asteroid field. The morning calm dove toward a cluster of space rocks orbiting the gas giant. The Vakrin ships pursued, their real weapons now coming to life. Plasma bolts screamed past the science vessel, close enough that proximity alarms wailed throughout the ship. One bolt clipped their port shield, and the entire ship rang like a struck bell. Shields at 70%, Taeyang reported, his young voice tight with fear but still functioning. Captain, those are military-grade plasma cannons. One direct hit will... I know what they'll do, Daewon interrupted. That's why they won't hit us directly. Kyung, weave between those asteroids. Make them work for it. The navigator's hands flew over her controls. The morning calm was not a nimble ship, but it was smaller than the Vakrin warships. It threaded between space rocks while the enemy vessels had to slow to adjust, to avoid collisions. Launch containers now, Daewon commanded. Taeyang triggered the cargo launchers. A dozen metal canisters shot out from the ship's hull, each one loaded with mining explosives meant for breaking up asteroids. They scattered across the void like seeds. The Vakrin ships ignored them, focused on their prey. That was their first mistake. Detonate, Daewon said. The containers exploded in sequence, not powerful enough to destroy a warship, but more than enough to fracture the asteroids around them. Thousands of rock fragments suddenly filled the space between the morning calm and its pursuers, creating an instant debris field. 2 Vakran ships plowed into the cloud at full speed. Rocks hammered their hulls, cracking armor, shattering sensors, turning their forward shields into Swiss cheese. That won't stop them for long, Hana said from her station. She had pulled up every file they had on Vakran technology. Their ships are built tough. They'll clear that debris in minutes. Then we use those minutes, Daewon replied. He studied the tactical display, his mind working through possibilities. 4 centuries of peace had not erased the human capacity for strategy. It had only buried it under layers of civilization. Now those layers were peeling away. The listening post was still there, still burning, still dying. Daewon could see escape pods launching from the station, small lifeboats carrying survivors into space. The Vakran were picking them off one by one, shooting them like targets. Something cold and hard settled in Daewon's chest. His grandfather had told him about this feeling too. Righteous anger, the old man had called it. The fury that came from seeing the strong prey on the weak. Kyung, plot a course directly toward the station. Maximum acceleration. Sir, that will take us right past 2 Vakran ships. I know. Bora, can you overload one of our mining lasers? There was a pause. Then the engineer's voice came back, filled with understanding. Yes, Captain. It will destroy the laser assembly, but I can make it happen. Give me 30 seconds. The morning calm burst out of the asteroid field, its engines howling. The 2 Vakran ships that had avoided the debris turned to intercept, their weapons charging for killing shots. 20 seconds. Plasma bolts filled the space around them. One hit caught their starboard shield straight on, and Daewon felt the impact in his teeth. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered. Shields at 40%, Taeyang shouted. 10 seconds, another hit, this one grazing the hull itself. Metal screamed. Somewhere below decks, people were shouting, fighting fires, patching breaches. Laser ready, Bora announced. Overloaded and locked on target. When this fires, we lose the entire forward assembly. Do it, Daewon ordered. The mining laser fired one last time, pumping out 3 times its normal energy in a single sustained burst. The beam was so bright it turned the viewport filters black. It struck the nearest Vakran warship directly in its engine section. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enemy ship exploded, its reactor going critical, tearing itself apart in a ball of white-hot fury. The shockwave hit the morning calm like a physical blow, sending it tumbling. Kyung fought the controls, firing thrusters, trying to stabilize. The second Vakran ship had to veer away to avoid the debris cloud of its destroyed companion. Damage report, Daewon barked, pulling himself back into his chair. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 4. Forward laser assembly completely destroyed. Shields at 20%. Life support stable. We're alive, Captain. Taeyang's voice held a note of disbelief. They were alive. They had just destroyed a warship with a mining vessel. The galaxy had forgotten what humans could do when pressed. But Daewon and his crew were remembering. The remaining 3 Vakran ships regrouped. And now they were not amused. They were angry. Their formation tightened, their weapons fully charged. They would not underestimate the humans again. Hana, talk to me, Daewon said. What do we know about Vakran psychology? The scientist pulled up her files, her eyes scanning rapidly. They're hierarchical. They respect strength and despise weakness. They're also proud. Very proud. They won't retreat from a single human ship. Not after we destroyed one of their own. It would be shameful. So they'll keep coming. Until we're dead or they are. Daewon nodded slowly. Then we can't win by fighting. We need to win by thinking. He studied the tactical display again, the listening post, the escape pods, the gas giant with its dozens of moons and its thick, swirling atmosphere. The pieces of a plan began to form in his mind. Taeyang broadcast on all coalition frequencies. Tell those escape pods to make for the 3rd moon. Tell them to land on the dark side and go silent. Sir, that moon has no atmosphere. No shelter, I know. Do it anyway. Bora, I need you to make our engines look damaged. I want smoke, I want sparks, I want the Vakran to think we're crippled. That won't be hard, Captain, Bora replied dryly. We are half crippled. Then make us look fully crippled. Kyung, when I give the word, I want you to dive us into that gas giant's upper atmosphere. And I mean dive, as deep as we can go without the pressure crushing us. There was silence on the bridge. Then Kyung said quietly, "That's insane, Captain." "Yes," Daewon agreed, "which is why they won't expect it." The morning calm began to limp away from the battle, trailing atmosphere and sparks. The Vakran ships pursued, sensing victory. The escape pods scattered toward the third moon, following the human captain's instructions even though they didn't understand why. Daewon waited, watching the tactical display, counting down the distance. "Captain, they're charging weapons for a final strike," Taeyang reported. "Hold steady. We're in range." "Hold." The Vakran ships fired in unison, 3 plasma bolts converging on the morning calm's position. "Now Kyung, dive, dive, dive." The science vessel dropped like a stone, plunging toward the gas giant. The plasma bolts flashed past where they had been a second before. The Vakran ships followed, unwilling to let their prey escape. The morning calm hit the upper atmosphere at full speed, and suddenly they were flying through a storm. Clouds of methane and ammonia swirled around them. Lightning crackled. The hull began to heat from friction. The Vakran ships followed them in, and that was their second mistake. Their warships were bigger, heavier, designed for the vacuum of space. The thick atmosphere grabbed at them, slowed them, heated their hulls faster than their cooling systems could handle. The morning calm, smaller and more maneuverable, dove deeper, then suddenly turned, using the gravity in the atmosphere to slingshot around the gas giant's curve. 2 of the Vakran ships tried to follow. Their hulls, already stressed from the heat, began to crack. One ship pulled up too late and went tumbling into the depths. The other made it out of the atmosphere but was badly damaged, trailing smoke and flames. The third Vakran ship, the command vessel, had been smart enough not to follow. It waited in orbit, weapons ready, but now the odds were even. 1 damaged human ship against 1 damaged Vakran ship. Daewon allowed himself a thin smile. "Let's finish this." The trial of Species 3 months had passed since the Battle of Gamma 7. The morning calm had limped back to Coalition space with 47 survivors, from 6 different species crammed into its cargo bays. The Vakran ships had been destroyed or driven off. The listening post was saved, or at least what remained of it. Captain Daewon should have been a hero. Instead, he stood in chains before the Galactic Coalition Council. The council chamber was enormous, a circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central floor. Representatives from 200 species filled those seats, their forms ranging from humanoid to utterly alien. Some breathed oxygen like Daewon. Others existed in sealed environments filled with methane or ammonia. Some did not breathe at all. At the highest tier sat the council arbiter, a being named Velmoth. The arbiter was insectoid with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked when it spoke. It was also, by all accounts, scrupulously fair. Captain Daewon of the human vessel Morning Calm. Velmoth's voice echoed through translation devices in a dozen languages. "You stand accused of violating the Treaty of Integration. Specifically, you engaged in military action while representing a protectorate species forbidden from such activities. How do you answer these charges?" Daewon stood straight despite the chains. He wore his captain's uniform, though it was worn and stained from the battle. He had refused to change it. Let them see what their laws had cost. "Guilty," he said simply. "I knew the law. I broke it anyway." A murmur rippled through the council. Some species nodded with approval. Others buzzed or clicked with disapproval. Ambassador Jiwoo, Earth's representative to the council, stepped forward. She was 60 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen 3 decades of diplomatic battles. She had dedicated her life to maintaining humanity's fragile position in the galaxy. Now she had to defend a man who had violated everything she had worked to preserve. "Council Arbiter," Jiwoo began, her voice calm and professional. "Captain Daewon does not deny the letter of the law, but we must consider the spirit of that law. The Treaty of Integration was designed to ensure peace and stability. Captain Daewon's actions upheld that goal. By engaging in warfare," one of the council members spoke up, a being of pure energy contained in a magnetic field. "The treaty is clear. Humans are not to engage in military action under any circumstances. The treaty is also clear that the coalition will protect its facilities and personnel," Jiwoo countered. But when listening post Gamma 7 called for help, where was the coalition fleet? 2 weeks away? Those people had hours. Who broke faith first? Another murmur, louder this time. Velmoth clicked his mandibles. "You present a valid point, Ambassador. However, The law cannot be selectively enforced based on convenience. If we allow humans to engage in military action when they deem it necessary, what prevents them from doing so whenever they choose? What prevents us, came a new voice, is the same thing that has prevented us for 400 years. Choice. All eyes turned to the chamber entrance. An old man walked in, moving slowly but with dignity. He wore a simple suit, but on his chest was pinned an ancient medal, tarnished with age. General Hyunwoo, former head of Earth's military academy before it was disbanded, had been called to testify. The general approached the council floor, standing beside Daewon. "I am 93 years old," he said. "I am one of the last humans alive who served in our military before the integration wars. I have been asked to explain to this council whether humanity has forgotten how to wage war." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "We have not forgotten. We chose to set it aside. There is a profound difference." Senator Isul, a human politician who had argued for continued pacifism, spoke from his seat. "General Hyunwoo, are you suggesting that humanity has been preparing for war all this time? That would be a violation of—" "No," the general interrupted. "I am saying we have been remembering. We teach our children martial arts, but we call them sports. We study historical battles, but we label them as entertainment. We maintain strategic thinking, but we apply it to business and science. We did not train soldiers, but we never let the knowledge die." He turned to face the full council. 400 years ago, you defeated us in war. You were right to do so. We were aggressive, expansionist, dangerous. We needed to learn that there were better ways to exist in a crowded galaxy. And we learned. We became traders, scientists, diplomats. We became good neighbors. "But that does not answer why Captain Daewon violated the treaty," Velmoth said. "It answers exactly that question," General Hyunwoo replied. "Captain Daewon violated the law because he remembered the most important lesson about warfare. You do not fight for glory or conquest. You fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is why we started fighting in the first place before we lost our way. That is what we remembered." Another voice called out from the gallery, young and passionate. "May I address the council?" Velmoth gestured permission. A woman descended from the upper tiers. Her name was Youngja, and she was a civilian historian from Earth. She carried a data tablet and her eyes were bright with intensity. "I have spent 15 years researching human cultural preservation," she said. "I can show you evidence that throughout 4 centuries of enforced peace, humans have quietly maintained every aspect of military knowledge. Not in secret weapon facilities or hidden armies, but in plain sight. In our games, our stories, our traditions." She activated her tablet and holographic images filled the air. Ancient human warriors practicing with swords. Modern humans practicing the same moves in dojos. Historical naval battles. Modern humans studying those same tactics in academies labeled as business schools. "We never forgot," Youngja said. "We just stopped making it who we were. We became a species that could choose violence rather than a species defined by it. That makes us more dangerous, not less. Because now when we fight, it is for the right reasons." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some species argued for harsher restrictions on humanity. Others pointed out that the Vakran threat was real and growing. Still others questioned whether any species could truly be trusted if they maintained hidden knowledge of war. Velmoth called for order, his mandibles clicking sharply. "We will hear from the survivors of Listening Post Gamma 7. One by one, the beings Daewon had saved gave testimony. A methane breather described how the morning calm had used tactics no military vessel would have considered. A floating jellyfish-like creature spoke of the human crew's willingness to risk everything for strangers. A small furry being wept as it described watching the human ship dive into a gas giant to save them. Through it all, Daewon remained silent. He had said what he needed to say. Guilty. He had known the law and broken it anyway. Finally, after hours of testimony and debate, Velmoth called for silence once more. "This council faces a difficult decision," the arbiter said. "The law is clear. Captain Daewon and his crew violated the Treaty of Integration. By rights, they should be punished severely." Daewon felt Ambassador Jiwoo tense beside him. General Hyunwoo's face remained impassive. "However," Velmoth continued, "this council is also not blind to reality. The Vakran incursion is not an isolated incident. Our intelligence suggests a larger invasion force is being assembled. We face a threat that will require every species, every ship, every resource we can muster. The Arbiter's compound eyes seemed to focus on Day One directly. The Treaty of Integration was designed for a galaxy at peace. But we are no longer at peace. Therefore, this council must adapt. Velmoth raised one chitinous limb. Captain Day One, you are found guilty of violating the treaty. Your punishment is as follows. You will serve the Coalition as a military advisor, helping to coordinate defense against the Vakrin threat. You will do this without rank, without official authority, as penance for your crime. He paused, then added, and humanity is hereby granted conditional military rearmament. You may rebuild your defense forces, train your soldiers, construct your warships, but you will do so under Coalition oversight, and those forces will serve the common defense, not human interests alone. The chamber exploded with reactions. Some species shouted in approval. Others screamed in protest. The debate would continue for days, Day One knew, but the decision was made. Ambassador Jiwoo leaned close to Day One and whispered, You just changed 400 years of human history. No, Day One replied quietly. I just reminded everyone what that history was. As he was led from the chamber, still in chains that would soon be removed, Day One thought of his grandfather. The old man had been right. Humans had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply been waiting for a reason to remember. Now they had one. Earth and its colonies would rebuild their military. They would forge new warships and train new soldiers. But they would do it as a species that had learned the cost of war and the value of peace. That combination, Day One suspected, would make them more formidable than they had ever been before. The Vakrin were coming. And when they arrived, they would find that humanity had not grown soft in 400 years of peace. They had grown wise, and wisdom, combined with the old human capacity for violence, was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. 1 year after the trial, Earth was transformed. Cities that had hummed with commerce now roared with industry. Shipyards that had built cargo vessels now forged warships. Training facilities that existed only in historical records were rebuilt. Their grounds once again filled with the sounds of soldiers learning their craft. Colonel Jae-hee stood in the command center of Earth's new military academy, watching holographic displays show real-time data from 100 facilities across human space. She was 42 years old, and until last year she had been a professor of theoretical mathematics. Now she designed fleet doctrine and battle strategies. The transition had been strange for everyone. Colonel, the first squadron of destroyers will be ready for trials next week, reported her aide. Admiral Day One wants to observe personally. Jae-hee nodded. Day One had been released from his symbolic chains and given command of Earth's reborn defense fleet. It was fitting, she thought. The man who had reminded humanity what it was, capable of, should lead them as they rediscovered that capability. But leading was more complicated than anyone had expected. How are the Coalition observers reacting to our progress? Jae-hee asked. Nervous, her aide replied honestly. They expected us to rebuild our old military. Instead, we're building something new. That was the truth. Humanity was not simply copying what they had been 4 centuries ago. They were integrating everything they had learned from watching dozens of alien species wage war. They were combining ancient Earth tactical wisdom with modern galactic technology. They were innovating in ways that made the Coalition observers both impressed and uncomfortable. In orbit above Earth, Captain Minseo walked the bridge of the destroyer Taekwondo, the first warship humanity had built in 400 years. She had been a cargo hauler captain before the rearmament. Now she commanded a vessel bristling with weapons and filled with soldiers who had been civilians months ago. Crew status report, Minseo ordered. Her first officer, a former mining engineer, consulted his display. All stations manned and ready, Captain. Weapons systems online. Shields at full capacity. We're ready for the trials. Minseo felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. The Taekwondo was beautiful in a deadly way. Sleeker than the old human warships, more efficient than most Coalition vessels, it represented everything humanity had learned about both peace and war. But could they actually use it when the time came? That was the question no one wanted to ask. Down on Earth's surface in a facility hidden in the mountains, Commander Sol trained humanity's first Special Forces unit in 4 centuries. The soldiers came from every human colony, volunteers who had given up peaceful lives to become warriors. Sol put them through exercises that would have been illegal a year ago. Hand-to-hand combat derived from ancient martial arts, tactical insertion techniques, Zero-gravity warfare. They trained with weapons and without them, learning that the most dangerous weapon was always the human mind. Again, Sewell barked as two soldiers sparred in the training ring. You are not just fighting with your body. You are fighting with 400 years of human experience. Every scientist who solved a problem under pressure, every trader who negotiated a difficult deal, every explorer who survived impossible odds, that knowledge is in your blood. Use it. The soldiers attacked each other with renewed intensity, their movements combining modern combat techniques with ancient traditions. They were learning to be something new, warriors who understood peace. Dr. Hana, now serving as liaison between human forces and coalition allies, sat in a conference room with representatives from a dozen species. The aliens watched holographic footage of human training exercises, their reactions ranging from fascination to alarm. Your soldiers move differently than other species, observed a reptilian delegate. More fluid, more creative. It is unsettling. Humans adapt, Hana explained. We watched how each of your species fights. We learned from all of you. Now we combine those lessons with our own history. That makes you unpredictable, another delegate said. Unpredictability in military matters is dangerous. So is predictability, Hana countered. The Vakrin are predictable. They are strong and direct and brutal. We need to be something else if we are going to stop them. An energy being flickered with what might have been concern. You realize the galaxy is watching humanity with great interest. Some species wonder if we made a mistake allowing you to rearm. They remember the integration wars. We remember them too, Hana said softly. We remember what we were. We also remember what we became. The question is not whether we can be trusted. The question is whether we can trust ourselves. That night, Admiral Daewon met with Earth civilian leadership in a secure facility. Politicians who had never considered military matters now had to make decisions about fleet sizes and weapon systems. The meeting was tense. Admiral, some members of the government are concerned about the scope of the rearmament, said one senator. We agreed to defensive forces. What you are building looks more like an invasion fleet. Daewon pulled up tactical displays showing Vakrin military capabilities. What I am building is what is necessary. The Vakrin do not understand defense. They understand strength. If we want to stop them, we need to be stronger. But at what cost? Another politician asked. We spent 400 years learning to be peaceful. In 1 year, we have become warriors again. What if we cannot go back? We never stopped being warriors, Daewon replied. We just stopped being only warriors. That is what makes us different this time. We know what we are fighting for. Not territory. Not resources. Not glory. We fight to protect the peace we have built. He stood facing them all directly. I understand your fear. I share it. But I remember something my grandfather told me. He said that the most dangerous human is not the one who loves war. It is the one who loves peace enough to defend it. That is what we are building. Not an army of conquerors, but an army of protectors. The politicians looked at each other, uncertainty on their faces. Finally, one of them nodded. Continue your work, Admiral. But remember that we are watching. All of us are watching. 3 months later, the first test came. A Vakrin scouting force appeared at the edge of Coalition space. 3 warships testing defenses and gathering intelligence. The Coalition fleet was days away. The only ships in range were human destroyers from the new fleet. Admiral Daewon gave the order. All ships engage. Captain Minseo commanded the Taekwondo as it entered its first real battle. Her crew, former civilians all, moved through their duties with practiced efficiency. Fear was present, but so was determination. Target the lead ship, Minseo ordered. Weapons, I want precision strikes, not brute force. Show them what human engineering can do. The Taekwondo's railguns fired, magnetic accelerators hurling projectiles at a fraction of light speed. They struck the Vakrin ship's shield generators with surgical accuracy, overwhelming them through concentrated fire rather than raw power. The Vakrin returned fire with their plasma weapons, but the human ships moved like dancers, using maneuvers that no military vessel should be able to perform. They had learned from Earth's atmospheric fighters, applying those principles to space combat. Deploy countermeasures, Minseo commanded. The Taekwondo released a cloud of metallic chaff combined with electronic warfare systems. The Vakrin targeting systems went haywire, their shots going wide. On the Morning Defender, Commander Saul led a boarding team as they breached one of the Vakrin ships. The Special Forces soldiers moved through the alien vessel with practiced efficiency, using tactics no coalition force had ever employed. They did not try to fight the Vakrin in direct combat. Instead, they sabotaged systems, created diversions, and withdrew before the enemy could organize a defense. The Vakrin were confused, angry, outmaneuvered. They had expected human ships to fight like coalition vessels, predictable, by the book, conservative. Instead, they faced an enemy that fought like humans had once fought on Earth, with creativity, flexibility, and a willingness to try things that should not work, but somehow did. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 2 Vakrin ships were destroyed and the third fled back into unknown space. The human destroyers had taken damage but suffered no casualties. Admiral Daywan watched the tactical replay from his command center, his face thoughtful. "Send this data to all coalition forces. Let them see what we can do." Colonel Jahe stood beside him. "The galaxy is definitely watching us now." "Good," Daywan replied. "Let them watch. Let them see that humans remember how to fight. More importantly, let them see that we remember why we fight." Word of the battle spread through coalition space within days. Humanity had faced the Vakrin and won, not through superior numbers or better weapons, but through superior thinking and the willingness to fight in ways no one expected. Some alien species celebrated. Others grew more nervous. A few began to wonder if allowing humanity to rearm had been wise after all. But in the halls of human military academies, in the shipyards where new vessels took shape, in training facilities across human colonies, a different conversation was happening. Soldiers and officers spoke not of conquest but of duty. They trained not to dominate but to defend. They built weapons with the hope they would never need to use them. Admiral Daywan gathered his senior officers 1 month after the battle. They stood on the observation deck of Earth's largest orbital station, watching ships move through the void. "The Vakrin will come in force," he told them. "That scouting force was just a test. When the real fleet arrives, it will be massive. We need to be ready." "How long do we have?" Captain Mincio asked. "Intelligence suggests 6 months. Maybe less." Commander Sol crossed his arms. "That is not much time to prepare a galaxy for war." "No," Daiwan agreed. "But it is enough time to remind them what humans are capable of when we remember both how to fight and why we should." He turned to face them all. These warriors who had been civilians, these soldiers who still understood peace. The Vakrin think they know what they will face. They expect the coalition to fight like they always have, organized, predictable, noble. They do not expect humans. They do not expect a species that combines 400 years of peace with 10,000 years of warfare. They do not expect warriors who fight not for glory but for protection. Daywan smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "They are going to learn." The Vakrin armada arrived at the Proxima Gate exactly when human intelligence predicted. 147 warships, each one larger than any vessel in the coalition fleet. They came like a wall of steel and fury, engines burning with the light of 1,000 stars. Admiral Daywan stood on the bridge of the flagship Phoenix Rising, watching the enemy approach on tactical displays. Around him, the coalition defense fleet assembled. Ships from 24 species took their positions, representing the combined military might of half the galaxy. But at the vanguard, at the point of greatest danger, flew the human fleet. 60 destroyers and cruisers, all built within the past year, all crewed by people who had been civilians before they remembered what their ancestors once were. "All ships report ready," reported his tactical officer. "Coalition commanders are requesting final orders." Daywan opened a channel that would be heard by every ship, human and alien alike. "This is Admiral Daywan. In a few moments, we will face an enemy that believes strength is everything. They see us as weak because we chose peace. They see the coalition as prey because we value life over conquest." He paused, letting his words sink in. "They are wrong. Peace is not weakness. It is strength under control. And today we release that control. Today we show them what happens when peaceful people are forced to become warriors again. Not because we love war, but because we love peace enough to defend it." The channel remained open as he gave the final order. "All ships engage the enemy. Remember what we fight for." The Vakrin armada charged forward, their commanders confident in their overwhelming numbers. They had fought the coalition before in small skirmishes and always won. This would be no different. That confidence lasted exactly 4 minutes. The human fleet did not meet them head-on as expected. Instead, they scattered, breaking into smaller groups that moved independently through the void. Each group used different tactics, making the battle impossible to coordinate against. Captain Mincio led her squadron in a flanking maneuver that brought them up against the Vakran left flank. All ships target their shield generators. Precision fire, conserve ammunition. The human destroyers fired their railguns in coordinated volleys, each shot placed with mathematical accuracy. The Vakran shields flickered and died under the sustained assault. When a Vakran ship tried to turn to face them, they were already gone, repositioning for another strike. On the right flank, Commander Saul led boarding teams onto 3 Vakran vessels simultaneously. His Special Forces soldiers moved through the alien ships like ghosts, sabotaging weapon systems and life support before vanishing back into space. The Vakran crews fought themselves in the confusion, not realizing the humans had already left. Colonel J. He coordinated the overall strategy from the command center, watching battle data flow across her displays. Admiral, the Vakran are trying to reform their lines. They are adapting to our tactics. Expected, Day One replied. Execute Plan Delta. Suddenly, the human ships that had been harassing the flanks retreated toward the Proxima Gate. The Vakran, seeing their enemy flee, pressed the attack. Their formation tightened, their ships accelerating to pursue. Dr. Hana, monitoring from a coalition science vessel, spoke urgently into her comm. Admiral, are you certain about this? If your calculations are wrong, they are not wrong, Day One interrupted. Humans have been calculating orbital mechanics for centuries. This will work. The Vakrian armada chased the retreating humans directly into the gravity well of Proxima Gate's star. The humans, with their lighter, more maneuverable ships, could navigate the intense gravitational forces. The Vakran warships, massive and heavy, began to struggle. Now, Day One commanded, all ships full acceleration. Brake and engage at will. The human fleet suddenly reversed course, using the star's gravity to slingshot back toward the enemy. They fell upon the disorganized Vakran formation like wolves on scattered prey. The battle became chaos. Human ships moved in ways that should have been impossible, using every trick that 400 years of civilian space travel had taught them. They used solar flares as cover. They hid in debris fields. They employed physics as a weapon, turning the very environment of space into an ally. Ambassador Jiwoo watched from Earth, seeing the battle data transmitted back in real time. She sat beside General Hyunwoo, the old warrior who had testified at Daewon's trial. We are winning, she said, disbelief in her voice. No, General Hyunwoo corrected gently. We are fighting the way humans fight. The winning comes from that. On the battlefield, the Vakran commander, Thelrax, the same creature who had faced Daewon at Listening Post Gamma 7, realized the truth too late. These were not the humans he had expected. These were not merchants playing at war. These were warriors who had spent 400 years learning to think, to adapt, to survive. And they had brought all that knowledge to this moment. Retreat, Thelrax ordered his fleet. Fall back to the secondary position. But the humans had anticipated this too. As the Vakran ships turned to flee, they found coalition vessels waiting for them. Ships from a dozen species who had learned from, watching the human tactics and now employed their own variations. The Vakran were trapped between the hammer of the human fleet and the anvil of the coalition forces. What followed was not a battle but a demonstration. The humans showed the galaxy what they had once been, what they had chosen to stop being, and what they could become when necessity demanded it. They showed creativity in warfare, flexibility in tactics, and most importantly, they showed restraint. When Vakran ships tried to surrender, the humans accepted. When escape pods launched, they were recovered, not destroyed. This was not genocide or revenge. This was defense, pure and simple. After 6 hours, the Vakran armada was broken. 43 ships destroyed, 72 captured or disabled. The remaining 32 fled back into unknown space. Carrying with them a message for their empire, humanity had returned to war, and they were nothing like the species the galaxy remembered. Admiral Daewon stood in the aftermath, his ship damaged but intact, his crew exhausted but alive. The Proxima Gate was held. The coalition was safe, and humanity had proven something that would echo through galactic history. The communication channel crackled to life. Admiral Daewon, this is Thelrax. I am in a disabled vessel awaiting capture. I would speak with you before your soldiers arrive. Day-1 accepted the channel. The Vakran commander appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes showing what might have been respect. You were merchants, Thelrax said. Scientists, traders, we studied you for years. How did you do this? How did you remember how to fight after so long? Day-1 considered the question carefully. We never forgot. We just stopped doing it because we chose to. There is a difference between being unable to fight and being unwilling to fight. But why? Thelrax demanded. Your species had power. You could have ruled. Because ruling is not the same as living, Day-1 replied quietly. 400 years ago, we lost a war. We could have been bitter. We could have plotted revenge. Instead, we learned, we grew. We became something better than warriors. We became a people who understood both peace and war, and who knew which one was worth preserving. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. That is what makes us dangerous now. We do not fight because we love it. We fight because we love peace, and we will do whatever is necessary to protect it. We remember why we started fighting in the first place, not for conquest or glory, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Thelrax was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head in acknowledgement. I understand now. You are more frightening than we imagined. Yes, Day-1 agreed, because we know when to stop. The conversation ended and Day-1 turned to his crew. They had done the impossible. Civilians turned soldiers, peace lovers turned warriors, all in the space of a year, and they had proven that humanity's greatest strength was not their ability to wage war, but their ability to choose when and why to wage it. 3 months after the battle, a memorial was built at the Proxima Gate. It listed the names of all who had died, human and alien alike. The inscription read, "We chose peace, but we never forgot the price of freedom." Earth's military did not disband after the victory. Instead, it transformed again, becoming a true defensive force that other coalition species looked to for training and tactical innovation. Humanity taught what it had learned, that the purpose of a military was not conquest but protection, not expansion but preservation. Admiral Day-1 retired from active service and returned to the Morning Calm, which had been rebuilt and converted into a museum ship. He gave tours to school children, telling them about the battle, about the choice humanity had made, and about the importance of remembering both peace and war. One day a young child asked him, "If we are so good at fighting, why do we not fight more?" Day-1 knelt down to the child's level and smiled. Because the greatest victory is the battle you do not have to fight. We remember how to wage war so that we can choose peace. That choice, that wisdom, is what makes us strong. The child considered this, then nodded with understanding beyond their years. In the years that followed, humanity became known not as conquerors or merchants or scientists, though they remained all of those things. They became known as protectors. When other species faced threats they could not handle alone, they called for human ships. Not because humans were the strongest or most numerous, but because they fought with both skill and purpose. The Vakran Empire eventually sued for peace. Having learned that the galaxy was not as weak as they had believed, the treaty was negotiated by Ambassador Jiwoo, who proved as skilled in ending wars as others were in fighting them. And through it all, humanity maintained the balance they had learned in that crucial year. They remembered how to fight. They remembered why they fought. But most importantly, they remembered why they had chosen peace in the first place, because peace was not weakness. It was strength under control. And when that control was released, when humanity remembered not just how to wage war but why wars were worth fighting, they became the most formidable force in the galaxy, not because they were the best warriors, but because they were warriors who understood peace, and that made all the difference. General Hyunwoo, now nearly 100 years old, gave one final interview before he passed away. The journalist asked him what he thought humanity's legacy would be. The old soldier smiled, his eyes distant with memory. We will be remembered as the species that forgot how to fight. And then, when the galaxy needed us most, we remembered, not because we wanted to wage war, but because we wanted to preserve peace. He paused, then added softly, We remembered why we started, and that is the only reason that matters. The interview ended, and the old general closed his eyes, content with what his species had become. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as guardians who knew the cost of war and the value of peace and who would defend one to preserve the other. They had remembered, and the galaxy would never forget.